So this is Realization of Tone in Mandarin Chinese Vocal Music by myself, Allan Bradshaw, and Benjamin Hull, my co-presenter. So I'll just run through the research background pretty quickly. That way we can get into the methodology. Our primary research question here is, what is the character of the interaction between tone and pitch in vocal melodies in modern musical genres such as Chinese popular music? So there are some terms to keep in mind whenever we use the word tone. We're using this to talk about pitch that's used to distinguish meaning. Melody is a succession of musical tones, a combination of pitch and rhythm. When we mention Mandarin Chinese in this presentation, we're specifically referring to Putonghua, which is the standard variety of Chinese in mainland China. And whenever we mention the word Tabolect, we mean a regional, non-standard, or non-official variety. For the purpose of this presentation, it's not necessary to know all the intricate details of tone contours in Chinese, but you can observe here that there are 4 tones, and we'll make brief mention of them in this presentation. So we had a few motivations going into this study. The one that really is salient here and that we'd like to bring out is that there's a sort of conundrum whenever we talk about tonal languages and music. You cannot produce 2 tones at the same time. So whenever you're singing, you can only carry a single pitch. So which one is realized, or which one wins out on the surface level? There's been a study that has looked at this relationship before, and there's one takeaway here that's particularly important to our analysis, which is that he split the tones into 2 groups based on their predominant pitch tracks and the way that they contributed to the phonological processes at play.
All right, so I'm going to go through some of the tests that we used in our study. The first one is the melody test. So this is something that is unique to our study, and that's just seeing if the melody of the song correlates to the melody or the relative pitch of the tones in the language. So we're considering the first and third tones in Mandarin to be level. So if the pitch in the song, if the melody is level, then we consider that it passed the test. Similarly, the second tone is rising. So if the melody rises, it passes. Fourth tone is falling. So if the melody falls, then it passes. And anything other than that would fail the test. The second test was the feature test. So here we're looking at the features that were proposed in the previous research. And so it has to do with the relative melody of the following note. So if some of the features are minus high and the following note in the song is higher, then we consider that to pass the test. If the tone features are plus high and the following note in the song is lower, then it passes the test. And then if the melody remains level, it doesn't matter what the features are, it is passed the test. And all other situations would fail this test. So we have those 2 main tests, the melody test and the feature test. We have another one that applies on top of that, and that is whether the previous tests occur on the beat, which is essentially the head of each measure. And that was something that we also found to be significant in his previous study. And we used these 5 different songs and encoded them in Excel based on the pitches, and then automatically computed whether they passed different tests. All right, so here are our initial results. If you look, it seems like a lot of the tests actually have fairly high pass rates, especially whether one test passes on a beat or not. However, the important thing to keep in mind, and this is something that previous studies I don't think took adequate care of, is how this compares to like a control group. how is this different from just a randomization of these features? So one of the things that we did in order to determine that is we actually randomized some of this in Excel and then iterated that multiple times, and we were able to compare how the actual song related to the different randomizations that we ran. So we tried 2 different randomizations in Excel, and we were able to compute the mean and standard deviation. So we also tried to determine the statistical significance based on that randomization. And we used z-testing. Actually, one of the biggest questions I think that we have after this is done, we felt like z-testing was a good way to represent this, but it's not the canonical way of doing z-testing. Essentially, normally you start with a large population, and so you're comparing a particular sample against a population. And we are doing that backwards. Essentially, we only have one sample, but we're comparing that against a control group that has multiple iterations. And so mathematically, that seems to work out, but we'd appreciate feedback from our viewers about whether this is the right way to go about this.
So out of the 5 songs that we looked at, the correlation between tone and musical pitch in Brightest Star in the Night Sky seems the most significant for a p-value of less than 0.1. Out of the other songs, Rainbow seemed to have no significant correlation between tone and pitch, and the remaining 3 were sort of a mixed bag. The tone seemed to correlate with musical pitch, but not as strongly as Brightest Star in the Night Sky. So for the conclusions of our research here, out of the 5 songs that we looked at, one of them showed an unambiguous correlation between tone and musical pitch. One showed no correlation, and the remainder fell somewhere in between. For Mandarin songs, there is some sort of potential that we found for this interaction between tone and musical pitch, but it doesn't seem to be necessitated. And different songs show different levels of interaction between tone and musical pitch. As far as methodology, we still don't have a clear test that's kind of like the catch-all for this. It seems that using multiple tests together gives us the best results or the most reliable results. So finally, both of the randomization methods that we use proved helpful and are a clear improvement over previous studies.
Thank you all, and hope to see you in the breakout room.